What has the evolution of Dan DiDio been like? Because there's been a lot of ebbs and
Oh
flows.
yeah, no, for me personally, it's always a rolling journey because you constantly have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, we have a creative talent pool. We have a fan base that's very familiar with our material. So the challenge is always to find ways to make it new and interesting to them. So when I first walked in the door, we did a little shock and awe when we first started with Identity Crisis, which got some people talking, but with Identity Crisis, which really reinterpret the characters in a new way and seeing them with a different light at the same time, then we spun around and we did Green Lantern Rebirth. And then with Green Lantern Rebirth, we brought back a lot of the core conceits of that. And the best part is that I had really worked extraordinarily well with Jeff Johns and Greg Rucker and Judd Winnick at the time, and they had such a good grasp. And there were three writers with different points of view, different sensibilities, but all share a love of the characters. And these guys actually loved working together. So with the three of them, we were really be able to help charge the course of the DCU. So for me, there's several periods of time. You had that moment where we were reinventing the wheel or getting it back to its core basics. I mean, when you look at Rebirth now, what people don't realize is we did a lot of that back when I first started at DC with Green Lantern Rebirth and even bringing back the Teen Titans back and just reestablishing a lot of the core conceits of who the characters were, including bringing back the original Kara Zor-El Supergirl. So that's the start when I first got in there, was to get it back to the characters and the sensibility that we knew and understood, and then you start to play with it. So then we go through Identity Crisis, then it gets us into the Countdown to Infinite Crisis, which is really started with the big storyline that takes us all the way through, possibly to the end of 52, the weekly series. And I always look at that as one big body of work. And then after that, we let the characters figure out their own way. But the pressure was on to be successful. So we probably moved out Final Crisis a little bit faster than we should have, but I still love that book. And I always loved working with Grant Morrison. He was that voice that we really needed in the DCU, who was able to interpret things that are classic but so different at the same time, And when you look at it then, you look at all the various artists that we had on board. Guys like Ivan Rice were great artists for us, and then we had Michael Turner working for us, and Carlos Pacheco, Ed McGuinness, so we have a lot of great visual sensibilities. So we were reinterpreting the characters, but we're also bringing a new, fresh look to the characters as well. Then we get into, as we get a little bit further down the road, I'm trying to go through my timeline in my head. It's funny you said that. We really got back in. We lost a little bit of our footing for a point there after Final Crisis, but then I think we got our ground back under our feet with Blackest Night, and then we were getting into Brightest Day, and ultimately the company was preparing to move, so it started to affect a lot of things, making decisions on who we were working with and how we're going to work, because some of the folks were going to stay, some of the folks weren't going to stay. So there was a lot of transition during that period, and that period gets us through at the start of Flashpoint. We have one transition, and then we had some changes take place, which really led us into the launch of New 52, which we felt was a shot to the system. At that point, the industry was flagging a little bit, and at that point, we knew we had to do something dramatic. So it was, electric paddles to the chest with New 52, and I think it really reinvigorated so much going on in the business. Sales were exceptional for us for a while. Trades still continue to sell very well because there's a clean interpretation, unencumbered by a lot of history, and that's what people wanted to see, is a great jumping on point. And we ran with that for a while too, and then ultimately once we got back to the West Coast and got settled out there, we were able to basically get back to the core basics again. And it's everything has a cycle. Everything's cyclical in comics, and that gets you to Rebirth, and Rebirth gets back to the core basics again. Because sometimes you move so far afield, you lose connection with the core sensibilities of the characters and material. So every once in a while you have to reset. And so with Rebirth, we got a little bit of a reset back on the character side. And the reaction's been great, and now it's time to start playing with them again. And we're off to the races again, one more time.
And this weekend I've been talking to a lot of artists and creators and even filmmakers and actors about like nerd rage, because it's kind of like crazy. And you've dealt with it a lot.
Always.
In that time. And Marvel's going through it right now pretty heavy. Like, are we going to be able to fix it?
Oh, yeah, no, you're always going to have nerd rage. You think about certain stories. The worst part of nerd rage for me is how it affects the talent. I could care about myself. My job is to run block, and that's your job. As a corporate executive, your job is to protect your talent. But my fear is always the talent is too much affected by what people say. Mm-hmm. They're hungry for that instantaneous feedback, and it's not really a clear representation of the market, of what people really enjoy. It's just people who are the most aggravated speaking the loudest. And the goal is to find a way to get people to tune that out and be true to their storytelling, be true to who they are, and believe in your material. Don't be afraid to tell your stories. Don't be afraid of what people say. Trust yourself, trust your own instincts, believe in what you're doing. So what we do is we plan things out. We plan it in advance. And so people might not like what we're doing at that moment, but we know it's on a long-term plan, so you can't switch it or else the whole thing falls apart. And you just got to believe in your stance. And if it doesn't work, you got to own up to it. You got to admit to your mistakes. And there's nothing wrong with that either, because our fan base is also very forgiving. You know, they get very outraged sometimes, but they're also very forgiving. And if you understand that and know that we're always trying, that's I think the key thing. I think people have to understand nobody goes out of their way to make a bad book. You know, that's not the plan. You know, it happens in the course of business. The goal is to try to make the best books possible. And the great part about our business is it's periodical. So you always constantly make it work. And you always have the next month to fix it. And that's what we do.